if you can't, okay,
that's
so
why I said at the start.
so that's
of
what
the
I'm saying.
conversation,
But you see,
I don't know.
if you say you can't prove or disprove of it,
Yeah.
then
It doesn't mean
then
it doesn't mean it's not true.
no, hold on. That's not good enough to dismiss it. Let me give you an example. If I say to you here that the Big Bang Theory itself, yeah?
Right.
Do you accept it, whatever? You say, look, I might be able to prove, I can't prove or disprove it. I've got evidence for it, but I can't prove or disprove it. That sentence, I cannot prove or disprove it, is applicable to almost everything. Is applicable to almost everything.
Yeah.
And you can use that sentence to get away from believing in anything. Now, what I'm saying to you today is that you can continue saying this to yourself, and I believe it's self-delusion, by the way. If you say, I can't prove or disprove, therefore I'm not going to believe, I believe that's a form of self-delusion. If you can find an example, if I can find you 1 billion examples using induction of something being the case for a reason, that's good reason to accept it. That's how science works. You accept science, you go to the doctor when you're ill. I'm saying that in the physical world, anything that you see which has limited amount of variables is dependent upon something else. I have 1 billion examples of that. Any example you want to give around us is an example of that. Anything around, in fact, is an example of that. I'm saying, you're saying, well, we can't prove or disprove. The same induction that you use to prove your own existence, or the same induction that you use to prove almost anything that you believe in, you've rejected here. But why?
Okay, so
do you see what I mean?
I could give you 1 billion examples of plants that are green.
Yes.
Every plant, as far as I'm aware, has an element of green.
That's a false dichotomy here.
But you're saying that if you went...
but I can get you a blue plant.
Let me finish. If you went 1 billion miles away and went to a planet which had life, based on that reasoning, you would say they must have, their plants will be green. Because I have 1 billion examples.
This is David Hume's whole white swan example, sorry. David Hume's white swan example is exactly this. If you say I've seen 100 swans, all of the swans are white, yeah? I see one black swan, I've disproved the thesis that all swans are white. I'm saying to you that everything around us in this universe, which has limited variables, including the universe itself, which has limited variables, is contingent on something else for its existence. It's dependent upon something else.
We disagree with that.
So if you have one example that disproves this thesis, you've done exactly what someone would have done if they found one black swan. If you haven't found the black swan, you cannot say that black swans exist.
Yes, but you also cannot prove that the black swan doesn't exist.
Yes, okay, fine. But then if you use that same methodology, this is why I'll be honest with you guys. Can I be honest?
No, I know you've already said.
Can I be honest? I want to be honest. Listen,
Yeah.
This is my honest truth here.
Yeah.
I sometimes with atheists, right? I feel sometimes there's a double standard in their approach. I'll be honest with you, right? Maybe you can correct me, and please do correct me, yeah? I believe that, for example, simple induction, which you would accept in almost any other context, when it comes to the discussion of theology, you reject it. Even if that induction is plentiful, is incredible in its number, you will still reject it. I don't see the reason why you should reject it. You see, look.
I don't see why it's plentiful.
Well,
if we find many examples of one thing, okay?
I'm yet to find one when it comes to sort of, I guess, what you're trying to argue in terms of theology.
No, I'm saying, look, you have to follow the logic.
I'm
saying I've made a point today, guys. The point I've made is that anything with limited variables depends upon something else in order for it to exist. Now, I'm saying everything that you can see around you is an example of that. Now, if I have 1 billion tried and tested, yes, 1 billion, 1 trillion tried and tested examples of something in the scientific world from day dot until this day, yeah, and that was put into any kind of scientific journal, it would be seen as a very strong type of science. Not any kind of science, it would be seen as a very strong kind of science. My question is, why do you not accept what I'm saying to be a strong argument if we would accept it with anything else? Why?
For me, I still, on this thing of the phone, it didn't come into existence.
I'm not talking about coming into existence.
Well, I think you are.
I'm just talking about contingency. There is a difference
really
between contingency and causation. Yes.
I don't understand the difference.
Okay, let me explain. Cause
Yeah.
means when something brings something,
Legs are going. Well,
brings something else, brings rise to something else.
Right.
Contingency is dependency. That's another synonym for dependency. So contingency and dependency are the same thing, whereas cause is when you have something which brings rise to something else. What I'm not talking about causation. I understand that you might not buy into the theory of causation, although it's everywhere. Once again, you might not buy into it, no problem. I'm saying now, forget about causation, let's talk about dependency and contingency. All I'm saying is that all that which has limited variables is contingent on something, must be contingent on something else. And I dare anyone to give me one example of the contrary of that, and I will reject the premise myself. I'll break the premise myself. I'll leave the premise myself.
The way I see it, there's, like you say, there's finite variables in the universe.
Yes.
And then some of those finite variables cause another finite variable to change, and that causes something else to change, and it all goes round in a circle.
Exactly.
I don't see any. I don't see why you have to kind of decide that the whole universe has to be created.
I've not said anything about created.
I think
This
it's the
is
same thing.
Try not to make a straw man of this argument, okay?
Can I just
Because
suggest
creation is something different.
To use your own argument on its side, I think part of the difficulty I have with disagreeing with the fact that the universe is not unlimited is the fact that the inference therefore leads me to the fact that there is something outside
Thank you
which
very
is
much.
created.
Thank you very much.
No, but to use your own argument against you, I don't think there's any other evidence for an existence of a creator
But
apart
Sammy,
from that
but Sammy,
inference.
I must-
Therefore,
Yes.
to me, it's a fairly equal chance that is either a creator that has created the universe and therefore it matches what you've said, or there's not, and the universe has been around
Sammy,
forever. For
I
eternity.
understand what you're saying, Sammy. I hear what you're saying. But I do want to say this to you. Bill, it's Bill, isn't it? Listen to me, yeah? What you've just said there, seriously, uncovered for me the psychological reasoning as to why you're giving this argument such a scrutinous kind of assessment. The reason why you're doing it is not because of the value or the strength of the argument. It's exactly because of what you've said. You've just said, if you think about what you just said, you've said that the reason why I don't want to grant you this premise is because it will necessitate an external independent force. That is not a reason. So in other words, you don't believe because you don't want to believe.
No.
That's exactly what it means. That's exactly
I
right.
would be happy to believe if there was any other evidence apart from that one concept that you're saying. If there's more evidence, I would be happy to believe. I'm not like anti the idea of believing. If there was more evidence, I would be happy to believe. But this argument. There's two strands there. There's two possibilities.
Yeah.
One is that
Take it, I'm sorry.
one is that the universe is being here for eternity, and therefore it matches the possibility that there has not been a creator.
But even if it was there for eternity, it doesn't mean it doesn't have limited variables.
The other possibility is that the universe has not been here for eternity, and therefore there might be a creator.
No, that's the false dichotomy.
So, but to me, there's.
See, look.
One of them does not trump the other.
No,
There's
that's the why. Even if the universe was,
equal evidence.
even
for both.
if the
In that
universe,
there's basically no evidence
look,
for either. It's just,
what I'm saying is,
we don't
even
know.
if the universe was here forever, even if we believed in what's referred to as eternal inflation model, even if we believed in the oscillating contracting of the universe, contraction, then even if we believed in all of that, it does not negate the fact that it has limited variables. Eternality in time does not mean unlimited.
I agree.
Yes, it does not mean infinity in variables.
I agree.
So here, the time aspect, which you keep referring to, is not applicable to contingency. It might be applicable, granted, to causation, but it's not applicable to contingency or dependency. What I'm saying to you guys is this.
No, it is applicable to dependency.
This is...
It is applicable to dependency,
How?
because if something's been around for eternity, then it's not dependent on anything to exist.
No.
It's always been.
Look, once again, you're referring to time. You're
Yes,
saying
but
if something has
that's
been
it.
around
Yeah.
forever, it doesn't require something else to exist. No, that's not true.
Why not?
That's not true, because you can have two entities that are around forever.
Sorry?
you can have two entities that were there around forever. One is dependent. But if you say that, then the one person that pushed is the cause, the ultimate cause. Now you're going back to Thomas Aquinas' argument. In fact, that's a God argument.
It isn't. It really
think about
isn't. It isn't.
It is, yeah.
Because he's not outside the circle.
Well, Thomas Aquinas' argument is that he was the first mover, right?
Yes, I know that
Yeah.
one. And really, I think all these variables is just movers or it's just back to creation. There's a chain of creation.
I guess, guys,
But there
it's
isn't.
time to look. It's time to kind of look above and beyond atheism. I know it sounds like atheism is the zenith of philosophical achievement in the Western Enlightenment experience, because atheism freed us from, it got rid of all of these chains of Christianity, the superstition, and now we're just going to focus on science. That's what it seems like, because you've been socialized into that. Just like people are socialized into religion.
I don't think it's you've portrayed it in a very negative way. It's purely saying to people, just try and think and justify what you see and what you believe. And
Atheist doesn't say anything of the sort. It just says that we don't believe the evidence of God's existence. That's all that it says. Nothing about inquiry, nothing about science, nothing about philosophy. Being an atheist doesn't mean you're critical. It just means you've rejected something. Now, if that thing that you've rejected,
because I'm being critical, and I haven't yet found. I haven't found a God. I haven't found a deity. So how can I?
what do you mean by found?
Well,
How do you define find?
Well, yourself, for example, you believe that there is a God. You believe that there is a higher force. You believe that there is a deity out there. If I don't feel that. I don't believe that. I can't see that. So therefore,
So that which you don't see, you don't believe.
that which I haven't been shown to be true.
How? How would you get? See, that's the thing. It goes back to what is your standards of truth.
Exactly.
And that's my question. Look, my point is this. Your standard of truth is in fact less in every other sphere except for the theological sphere. That's my contention. You have to be introspective. You have to be honest with yourselves. If someone had come to you and said, we have done scientific experimentation on 1 million live examples, 1 million, and we have found that every time we dissect this thing happens, or that thing, this thing happens. You think this is strong science? It's good science. You'd accept it.
Yes, but you're talking about things that we know about our own Earth, or the limits
Physical,
of our the limits of our knowledge, which is Earth, one other celestial thing which we've landed on, which is the moon, and we've travelled to via satellites to a few other planets, right? So again, using my argument of there's billions and billions of plants in the world, they all have some bits of green in them. You're basically saying that therefore if we went to another planet on the other side of the universe, it must be green.
No,
No,
I'm not.
no.
Look,
That's not true, is it?
no. What I'm saying is this.
You're not assuming that because that planet is just so far away, it's so beyond our own limits of our knowledge and the limits of our exploration as humans that you couldn't possibly comment on the fact on the colour of
exactly.
the grass on the other side of the universe.
All right, fine.
And it's the same argument. Although you're correct, if we did millions and millions of experiments on on animals or whatever. Or whatever it is, and it all comes out the same conclusion. Therefore, it is logical to assume that conclusion is correct. You can't use conclusions from our limited knowledge of the limits of our exploration as humans to make assumptions about the whole universe.
Yeah, all right. So you're talking about the problem of induction, yeah?
You're saying it's like, look at this tiny corner of my shirt, it's blue.
exactly. Yeah, I
if
agree.
that's all you know,
Right.
and then you make an assumption the whole shirt is
you're
blue,
right. Okay, so you're
that's
talking
not
about
right.
You're talking about the problem of induction, yeah? Accept that
Yeah.
there is such a thing as a problem of induction,
Yeah.
and therefore science in its nature is a changing thing.